Amara Okonkwo didn't plan to throw water in a mafia boss's face at Seoul's most exclusive restaurant. She definitely didn't plan to do it while his 9-year-old son watched with wide, terrified eyes. But when Park Jae-won raised his hand to strike the child for spilling soup on a diplomat's wife, Amara's body moved before her brain caught up. The glass of ice water hit his face with perfect accuracy. The restaurant went silent. Every eye turned to her. And Jae-won, the wolf of Gangnam whose name made grown men weep, stared at her with an expression that was equal parts shock and something far more dangerous. His son, Min-jae, stopped crying mid-sob and looked at Amara like she'd just performed a miracle. She looked back at Jae-won, her hand still holding the empty glass, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might explode, and said the only thing that came to mind. That child needs dinner, not violence. I'll take him. One meal. Then you can kill me or whatever it is you do to people who disrespect you. Welcome to Unfold Korean Story, where love doesn't ask permission and danger is just foreplay. What happens next will leave you breathless, so don't you dare click away. 3 months before that fateful dinner, Amara had been standing in the ruins of her Chicago restaurant, watching firefighters extinguish what was left of her dream. The investigation would later call it electrical failure. Amara knew better. Her ex-business partner, the man she'd trusted with her recipes and her heart, had cleaned out their bank account and disappeared 2 weeks earlier. The fire was just his final middle finger on the way out. She had nothing left. No business. No savings. No reason to stay in a city that had chewed her up and spit her out. When her cousin Chioma called from Seoul talking about a position at an international culinary institute, Amara said yes before she could talk herself out of it. Running away felt like failure. Staying felt like dying slowly. Seoul swallowed her whole. The language barrier was worse than she'd expected. The loneliness was crushing. But the job at the institute was real, teaching African cuisine to Korean culinary students who were hungry to learn something beyond their traditional boundaries. She was good at it. Good enough that after 6 weeks, the director recommended her for a private job, teaching cooking classes to the children of Seoul's elite at an exclusive after-school program. That's where she met Min-jae. 9 years old, small for his age, with his father's sharp features and his late mother's gentle eyes. He didn't speak. Not to her, not to the other children, not to anyone. He would stand at his cooking station, hands trembling as he tried to follow her instructions. His whole body radiating anxiety so thick Amara could feel it from across the room. The other children mocked him, called him stupid, said his father's money couldn't buy him a brain. Amara shut that down fast, but the damage was already done. Min-jae withdrew further into himself, his hands shaking so badly he could barely hold a knife. One afternoon, after all the other children had left, Amara found him still at his station, staring at a bowl of ingredients like they held the secrets of the universe. She sat beside him, careful not to crowd him, and said softly, "You don't have to talk if you don't want to. But I'd like to know what you're thinking about." He didn't respond. Didn't even look at her. But his hands stopped shaking just a little. "I'm thinking about jollof rice," she continued conversationally. "My grandmother's recipe. She used to say that good food doesn't need words. It speaks for itself." She pulled out her phone, showing him a photo of her family gathered around a table laden with food. "That's my family. Loud, chaotic, always arguing about whose jollof is better. But at that table, everyone belongs." Min-jae's eyes flickered to the photo, then back to his bowl. Then, slowly, deliberately, he reached for the wooden spoon and began to stir. If you're already hooked, hit that subscribe button right now because this story is about to get intense, and you don't want to miss what happens when the mafia boss finds out a stranger is the only person his son trusts. Over the next weeks, a routine developed. Min-jae would stay after class, and Amara would teach him recipes that didn't require talking. They communicated through cooking, through the universal language of measuring and mixing and tasting. His confidence grew. His hands steadied. And one day, he brought her a piece of paper with shaky handwriting. "Thank you for seeing me." Amara's eyes filled with tears. She wrote back, "Thank you for letting me." She didn't know Park Jae-won existed until the parent observation day. The director had emphasized that this event was crucial, that the parents paying premium tuition expected premium attention. Amara prepared her best demonstration, planned activities that would showcase the children's skills. Then Jae-won walked in. The room's energy shifted instantly. Parents who'd been chatting fell silent. Teachers straightened their postures. Even the children seemed to sense something predatory in the air. He was tall, broad-shouldered, devastatingly handsome in the way of men who'd never had to worry about being liked because fear commanded more respect. His black suit was immaculate. His expression was carved from ice. His eyes found Min-jae immediately. The boy's whole body went rigid. Amara watched the interaction with growing unease. This wasn't a father checking on his son's progress. This was a general inspecting a disappointing soldier. When Min-jae dropped an egg, Jae-won's jaw tightened. When Min-jae struggled to crack another one, Jae-won's hands clenched into fists. The demonstration ended. Parents collected their children. But Jae-won lingered. His gaze fixed on Min-jae with an intensity that made Amara's skin crawl. She was gathering supplies when she heard it. His voice low and cold and cutting. Pathetic. You can't even complete a simple task without embarrassing me. Amara turned to see Min-jae's face crumple. The boy didn't cry, didn't speak, just stood there absorbing his father's contempt like he'd heard it so many times before that it no longer surprised him. Something in Amara snapped. She crossed the room, positioning herself between father and son. He completed every task today. Successfully. He made Korean-Nigerian fusion dumplings that were perfect. Whatever standard you're measuring him against, it's the wrong one. Jae-won's eyes narrowed. You're the teacher. I'm his teacher. And I'm telling you that your son is talented and capable, and the only thing holding him back is fear. Fear of failing you. You know nothing about my son or what he needs. I know he needs someone who sees his effort instead of just his mistakes. The air between them crackled with tension. Then Jae-won did something unexpected. He smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. You're either very brave or very stupid. I haven't decided which. Neither. I'm just someone who cares about that boy's well-being more than I care about your ego. His smile widened, sharp as a blade. Fascinating. What's your name? Amara Okonkwo. Well, Miss Okonkwo, since you care so much about my son's well-being, perhaps you'd like to discuss it over dinner. Tonight. My driver will collect you at 7. It wasn't a request. It was a command wrapped in courtesy. Amara opened her mouth to refuse, but Min-jae's hand slipped into hers, his grip desperate and pleading. She looked down at his face, saw the hope there, and heard herself say, "Fine. 7 o'clock." That's how she ended up at Mingle's, one of Seoul's most exclusive restaurants, sitting across from a man whose reputation included words like ruthless, deadly, and untouchable. Jae-won had changed into a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her yearly salary. He ordered in rapid Korean, dismissing the server with a gesture that made it clear he was used to being obeyed. "You're wondering why I invited you," he said once they were alone. "I'm wondering if this is the part where you threaten me to stay away from your son. Should I? That depends on whether you actually want him to have a chance at a normal life, or if you're content watching him suffocate under your expectations." His jaw tightened. "You overstep. Someone has to. That boy is drowning and you're standing on the shore criticizing his swimming technique. You think you understand him. After a few weeks of cooking classes. I think I see him. Which is more than I can say for you." The words hung between them, dangerous and true. Amara braced herself for his anger. Instead, Jae-won leaned back in his chair, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "Min-jae hasn't spoken in 2 years, he said finally. "Not since his mother died. I've brought in specialists, therapists, doctors from around the world. Nothing works. He just retreats further inside himself." Amara's anger deflated slightly. "I'm sorry. That must be incredibly difficult." "Difficult? He laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's a diplomatic way to put it. My son can't function in the world I need him to inherit. Every day he stays silent is another day he proves he's not strong enough to survive in my world. Maybe he doesn't want to survive in your world. Maybe he wants to be a child. Children in my world don't get to be children. They get to be targets. The raw truth in his voice caught her off guard. She looked at him properly for the first time, past the expensive suit and cold demeanor, and saw the exhaustion lurking beneath. This wasn't just an impatient father. This was a man terrified that he was failing the one person who mattered. What if you're measuring him by the wrong standards? She said softly. What if his silence isn't weakness but survival? Maybe he's protecting himself the only way he knows how. And how do I reach him? How do I help him when everything I do pushes him further away? You start by stopping. Stop trying to mold him into something he's not. Stop treating his differences like defects. Start seeing the boy he actually is instead of the heir you need him to be. Jae-won was quiet for a long moment. Then, he talks about you. Or rather, he writes about you. Shows me pictures of food you made together. It's the only time I see him even remotely happy. He's a sweet kid. Talented too. He never shows me anything he makes. Never seeks my approval. That's because he's terrified of your disapproval. You've taught him that mistakes equal worthlessness. So he'd rather show you nothing than risk being inadequate. The truth landed like a blow. Jae-won's expression flickered, something vulnerable breaking through before he locked it away. I don't know how to be different. This is all I know. This is what my father taught me. Then learn. For him. Be the father he needs, not the father you had. Their food arrived then, interrupting the moment. They ate in tense silence, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on them. Amara was pushing rice around her plate when Jae-won spoke again. Teach me. She looked up startled. What? How to reach him? How to be what he needs? Teach me. I'm not a therapist or a parenting expert. No, but you're the only person who's gotten through to him in 2 years. That makes you more qualified than anyone else I've met. His dark eyes held hers. Please. Please undid her. This proud, dangerous man was asking for help, something she suspected he'd never done before in his life. Okay. But we do this my way. No shortcuts. No forcing results. Just patience and presence. Agreed. That was the beginning. 3 times a week, Jae-won would come to the institute after Min-jae's class. Amara would teach them both to cook, creating space for father and son to connect through something other than expectations and disappointment. It was awkward at first. Jae-won was terrible at cooking, all precision and control when cooking required intuition and flexibility. Min-jae would watch his father fumble with ingredients, and slowly something shifted. The fear in his eyes began to soften. One evening, Min-jae handed his father a wooden spoon. Jae-won took it like it was made of gold. They stirred a pot of stew together, and Amara watched tears stream down Jae-won's face, silent and unchecked. He's never let me help him before, he whispered later, after Min-jae had fallen asleep on the institute's couch. Never trusted me enough. He's learning that you're safe. That's progress. Because of you. Jae-won looked at her with an intensity that stole her breath. You gave me back my son. How do I repay that? You don't. You just keep showing up. Keep trying. Keep being present. Something shifted between them that night. The professional distance they'd maintained began to feel less like protection and more like denial. Amara found herself thinking about him at odd hours. Found herself looking forward to their sessions with an anticipation that had nothing to do with Min-jae and everything to do with the way Jae-won's eyes softened when he looked at her. She told herself it was inappropriate. He was technically a client's parent. He was dangerous. He was everything she should avoid. But then he'd smile at her, that rare genuine smile that transformed his entire face, and she'd forget every reason she'd listed for staying away. 2 months into their arrangement, everything changed. They were at Jae-won's penthouse for a private session when Min-jae, energized by successfully making pasta from scratch, ran to get his notebook to show Amara something. He moved too fast, knocked into a server carrying drinks for a business meeting happening in the adjacent room. The tray crashed, glass shattered, and before anyone could react, one of Jae-won's associates, a woman in her 50s with a face like carved stone, was drenched in red wine. The room froze. Min-jae's face went pale. The woman stood slowly, her expression murderous. Control your child, Jae-won, before he becomes more of a liability than he already is. Jae-won's hand moved toward Min-jae. Whether to comfort or reprimand, Amara would never know. Because the boy actually flinched away from his father, his whole body curling into itself protectively. And Jae-won's face crumpled. Just for a second. But Amara saw it, that devastating moment when he realized his son was afraid of him. His hand, still raised, began to shake. Then it curled into a fist. "Get out," he said, his voice deadly quiet. Amara thought he was talking to her until the woman in the wine-stained dress turned and fled, along with everyone else from the business meeting. Then it was just the three of them in the enormous room, Min-jae crying silently, Jae-won standing frozen, and Amara trying to figure out how to fix this. She knelt beside Min-jae. "Hey, accidents happen. It's okay." He shook his head violently, pointed at his father, then at himself, then made a striking motion. Amara's blood ran cold. "Your father was going to hit you." Min-jae nodded. She looked up at Jae-won, whose face had gone completely blank. "Is that true? I don't hit my son. But you did. Before. That's why he flinched." The silence stretched, painful and damning. Finally Jae-won spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Once, when he was 6, he ran into traffic. I was terrified and I reacted without thinking. I've never forgiven myself. But he hasn't forgotten." "No." Jae-won's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "He hasn't. Drop a comment right now telling us what you'd do in this situation. Would you stay and help, or walk away? Your thoughts matter to us." Amara stood, positioning herself between father and son again. "Okay. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to kneel down so you're at his eye level. You're going to apologize not just for today but for that day when you hit him. You're going to promise him, with me as witness, that you will never raise a hand to him again. And then you're going to mean it. You think it's that simple. I think it's a start. The question is whether you're brave enough to be vulnerable in front of your son." Jae-won stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he lowered himself to his knees. "Min-jae," he said softly. The boy didn't look at him. "Min-jae, please look at me." Min-jae's eyes flickered up, wary and afraid. "I'm sorry," Jae-won continued, his voice breaking. "I'm sorry for hitting you when you were 6. I'm sorry for every time I've made you afraid. I'm sorry for being the kind of father who makes his son flinch instead of feel safe." Tears were streaming down his face now, unchecked and raw. "You are not a liability. You are not a disappointment. You are my son and I love you more than I know how to say, and I am so sorry that I made you doubt that." Min-jae stared at his father, his small body trembling. Then, miracle of miracles, he moved. Slowly, hesitantly. He crossed the space between them and threw his arms around Jae-won's neck. Jae-won caught him, holding him like he was the most precious thing in the universe, his whole body shaking with sobs. "I've got you," he whispered into Min-jae's hair. "I've got you and I'm never letting go. Promise. I promise." Amara watched them, tears streaming down her own face, feeling like she was witnessing something sacred. When Jae-won finally looked up at her, his eyes were red but clearer than she'd ever seen them. "Thank you," he mouthed. She nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. That night, after Min-jae had fallen asleep in his room, Jae-won and Amara sat in his study, both exhausted from the emotional weight of the evening. He poured them both whiskey, hands still shaking slightly. "I never thanked you properly," he said. For throwing water in my face that day at the restaurant. She laughed despite herself. I still can't believe I did that. I can. You're possibly the bravest person I've ever met. Brave enough to challenge me. Brave enough to see past what I am to what I could be. He set down his glass, turning to face her fully. Brave enough to make me want to be better. Jae-won. I'm in love with you, he said simply. I know it's inappropriate. I know there are 1,000 reasons why this is a terrible idea. But I've never been good at denying what I want, and I want you. Not just for tonight or next week. I want you in my life, in my son's life, in every moment of every day. Amara's heart hammered. That's a lot of pressure to put on someone you've known for 3 months. Then tell me you don't feel it too. Tell me I'm alone in this and I'll never mention it again. She couldn't. Because she did feel it, this terrifying, overwhelming pull toward him. This man who was equal parts danger and devotion, whose love for his son had cracked him open and revealed someone worth knowing. I feel it, she admitted. But I'm scared. You're not exactly low risk, Jae-won. Your world is dangerous and complicated, and I'm just a cooking teacher who threw water in your face. You're everything, he corrected. You're the reason my son is healing. You're the reason I remember what it means to hope. You're the reason I wake up every morning and think maybe I can actually be the man you see when you look at me. He moved closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. Stay, he whispered. Not just tonight. Stay with us. With me. Let me show you every day how much you matter. She should have said no. Should have maintained boundaries, protected her heart, kept some distance. Instead she kissed him. Poured every ounce of fear and hope and desperate longing into it. His arms came around her immediately, crushing her against him like he'd been waiting his entire life for permission to hold her. Is that a yes? He murmured against her lips. It's a maybe. A terrified, hopeful, probably insane maybe. He laughed, the sound bright and genuine. I'll take it. They ended up in his bedroom. She hadn't planned it, but then again she hadn't planned any of this. He undressed her slowly, reverently, like she was something precious. When they finally came together, it felt less like passion and more like recognition. Two people who'd been searching for something they didn't know they needed until they found it in each other. Afterward, she lay against his chest, listening to his heartbeat slow, feeling his fingers trace lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. I meant what I said, he whispered into the darkness. I love you. And I'm going to spend every day proving I'm worth the risk. You already are, she said softly. You were worth it the moment you got on your knees and apologized to your son. That's when I knew. Knew what? That underneath all the danger and power and control, you're just a man trying to do right by the people you love. That's all I've ever wanted. Someone willing to try. He tightened his arms around her. Then you have me. Completely. Absolutely. For as long as you'll have me. She fell asleep in his arms, feeling safer than she had in years. The next morning, she woke to find Min-jae standing beside the bed, staring at her with wide eyes. She froze, mortified, but before she could say anything the boy smiled. Actually smiled. Then he climbed onto the bed, curled up between her and his father, and went back to sleep. Jae-won woke to find them both there. His son nestled against Amara like she'd always been part of their family. When his eyes met hers over Min-jae's head, they were bright with tears. This, he mouthed. This is everything. The following months were a revelation. Amara moved into the penthouse. It felt fast, probably was fast, but also inevitable. Min-jae blossomed with both of them there. His confidence growing daily. He started using sign language to communicate. His hands speaking the words his voice couldn't yet manage. He wrote more. Drew more. Started showing his father his creations without fear. And slowly, carefully, he began to heal. One transformed too. He was still dangerous, still commanded rooms with his presence, but with Amara and Min-jae, he was soft, gentle, present in ways that mattered more than power ever could. He learned to cook, badly but enthusiastically. He learned to listen instead of command. He learned that strength wasn't about control but about vulnerability. For months after Amara moved in, Min-jae spoke. They were making dinner, the three of them working in comfortable synchronization, when Min-jae looked up at Amara and said, clear as day, "Thank you." The wooden spoon fell from Amara's hand. Jae-won turned so fast he knocked over a bowl. They both stared at Min-jae, who smiled shyly. "For being here," he continued, his voice rusty but unmistakable. "For making Appa happy. For making me feel safe." Amara dropped to her knees, pulling him into a fierce hug. "Oh, sweetheart. You never have to thank me for that. I love you," Min-jae said into her shoulder. "Like an Amma." She pulled back, tears streaming down her face. "I love you too. So much." Jae-won was crying openly, not even trying to hide it. He joined their embrace, the three of them holding each other like they could stop time through sheer force of will. That night, after Min-jae had fallen asleep, his voice worn out from talking for hours about everything he'd been storing up for 2 years, Jae-won found Amara on the balcony. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, pulling her back against his chest. "Marry me," he said into her hair. She turned in his arms. "What? Marry me. Make this official. Make us a family in every way that matters." He pulled a small box from his pocket, opening it to reveal a ring that caught the city lights like a star. "I know it's fast. I know there are complications. But I've never been more certain of anything in my life. You are my everything, Amara. You and Min-jae. Please say yes." "Yes." The word came out without hesitation. "Yes, absolutely yes." He slid the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, then kissed her like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning. "I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret this," he promised. "I could never regret you, either of you. This is the family I always wanted but never thought I'd find." They married 3 months later in a small ceremony at his penthouse. Min-jae served as ring bearer, his voice strong and clear as he read a poem he'd written about family and love and second chances. Amara wore white, her natural hair in an elaborate updo decorated with flowers. Jae-won wore black as always, but his eyes held more light than she'd ever seen. When the officiant pronounced them married, Min-jae cheered, and Amara thought her heart might burst from the sheer joy of it all. The first year of marriage brought changes. Jae-won began transitioning his business toward legitimate operations, a slow and dangerous process that required careful maneuvering. Some associates resisted. Some had to be eliminated. But gradually, he built something cleaner, something his son could inherit with pride. Amara expanded her work at the Institute, developing a program specifically for children with communication challenges. Every child she helped felt like honoring Min-jae's journey. She also started a food blog, sharing recipes and stories that celebrated her Nigerian heritage and her new Korean home. And then one morning she woke up nauseous. The test she took confirmed what she'd suspected. When she showed Jae-won the positive result, he went absolutely still. "We're having a baby," she whispered. He sank to his knees, pressing his face against her still flat stomach, his shoulders shaking with sobs. "Thank you," he said over and over. "Thank you." Min-jae's reaction was even better. He listened to the news with his characteristic seriousness, processing in silence, then announced, "I'm going to teach them everything. Korean and Igbo and English and sign language and how to cook and how to draw and..." "Baby steps," Amara laughed. "Literally. I'm going to be the best big brother ever," he declared. "Better than anyone has ever been a big brother before." "I believe you," she said, pulling him into a hug. Their daughter arrived 8 months later, small and perfect with a cry that could wake the dead. They named her Ji-yoon, meaning wisdom and grace. Min-jae was enchanted, spending hours beside her crib talking to her about everything and nothing. "She smiled at me," he reported breathlessly one afternoon. "A real smile. She knows I'm her brother." Jae-won watched his children with an expression of wonder that still made Amara's heart ache. "I never thought I could have this," he said quietly. "A family. Real happiness. Peace. You deserve it," she said firmly. "All of it. Only because of you. You gave me everything that matters." 3 years later they added one more member. A son they named Shabiz, meaning God is King, honoring Amara's Nigerian roots. He arrived early, impatient to meet his family, with his father's sharp features and his mother's warm eyes. Their family was complete. Loud, chaotic, perfect. Min-jae at 14 was thriving, his voice now confident as he pursued interests in art and music. Ji-yoon at 3 was fearless, already bilingual and determined to keep up with her older brother. And Shabiz, just days old, was the center of everyone's universe. On the anniversary of the day they met, Jae-won took Amara back to Mingles. They sat at the same table where she'd first challenged him, where everything had begun. "Do you remember?" he asked. "Every detail. You ordering for both of us like a dictator. Me telling you off. The moment I realized that underneath all that armor was just a scared father trying to help his son. You saw me when no one else did. Saw past the wolf of Gangnam to the man who just wanted his son to be okay." She squeezed his hand. "And you saw me. Saw past the angry, hurt woman running from her failures to someone who just wanted to matter to someone. You matter to me. Plus, to this entire family we've built." His eyes were bright with emotion. "You are our everything, Amara. Like home. Our reason for being better." "Right back at you," she whispered, kissing him softly. "You and Min-jae and Ji-yoon and Shabiz. You're my whole heart." Outside the restaurant, Seoul sparkled in the night. A city of millions, each with their own stories of love and loss and redemption. But for Amara Okonkwo and Park Jae-won, the story had always been simple. A boy who couldn't speak. A woman who refused to look away. A father who learned that love required vulnerability more than strength. Their love had grown from one impulsive moment, throwing water in a powerful man's face and demanding he do better. It had survived danger and doubt, cultural barriers and complicated pasts. And it had created something miraculous, a family built not just on blood but on choice. On showing up every day and choosing each other again and again and again. Min-jae was 16 now, planning to study art therapy in university, determined to help other kids find their voices. Ji-yoon was 5, already showing signs of the same fierce spirit that defined her mother. Shabiz was 2, curious and kind with his father's intensity and his mother's warmth. And at the center of it all, Amara and Jae-won remained, unshaken, united, eternal. If this story moved you, if you felt every emotion, every moment of fear and hope and overwhelming love, then hit that like button right now. Subscribe to Unfold Korean Story because we bring you stories that prove love doesn't ask permission. It just demands everything. Comment below and tell us your favorite moment. Was it when Min-jae spoke for the first time? When Jae-won proposed? When Amara threw that water? We read every comment and your story might inspire our next video. Share this with someone who needs to believe in second chances, in brave love, in families built from broken pieces.